Hello again. A story today from 1986. I've been looking back at our Buzzsprout site, the site with all the audio stories on, and I'm looking at the most popular ones to see how they would turn out if I did them like this, with a story with me telling you the story with no script. So the one about Wyberton Church Gateway is quite a popular story, and over the years quite a few people have been listening to it. So if you want to listen to the audio version, it's on our Buzzsprout. You can look on our website and you'll see options there for finding audio stories or the videos or the books online and that kind of thing. So this is on the Buzzsprout. You can download the stories to anything like a phone or just listen when you want to. So this was about 1986, and we'd been at Northcote, which is a great steeping near Spilsby in Lincolnshire, for a couple of years. We'd gone there after losing our business, transport business, and consequently lost the house at New Bolingbroke, and we'd managed to buy this small holding, 5 acres, with a little 2 up and 2 down cottage. So after living for 14 years in a Georgian country gentleman's residence, living in a 2 up and 2 down, that's 2 rooms down and 2 rooms up, small cottage, came as a bit of a shock to us all. And of course I hadn't got a job. So Ruth was carrying on doing her nursing, and she was working for an agency for a long time, getting jobs wherever she could in Lincolnshire and travelling to the jobs. And I was working for Rundles initially, driving their lorry. More stories of that to come up. You can see about those in the Buzzsprout. And then yes, what happened? Yes, after Rundles I drove for Lindsay and Holland Farmers at New Leek. That was a local farming group, and I drove delivery lorries for them. In the meantime, we'd managed to keep 2 horses and 2 carriages. We'd sold off everything else the last few months at New Bolingbroke to give us enough money to live on. So all our horse-drawn carriage collection had gone, apart from 2. One was a Victoria carriage, open with a hood, which was very popular for weddings. Then of course we still had 2 horses, so we were using these horses and carriages to supplement our income, to help us to live. And this is about one of the weddings. So we did, I think it must run into many, I wouldn't say thousands, but over the years from the late 1970s until we stopped doing weddings in about 2000, then we must have done hundreds throughout Lincolnshire, all over Lincolnshire, and indeed some into Nottinghamshire. In some days we had 2 carriages out on the same day. Now that took some doing, I can tell you. Took some planning. Now this wedding then was about 1986, and it was at Wyberton, just outside Boston. Wyberton's a suburb of Boston. So part of it. Wyberton is towards the Frampton Marsh, just between Boston and Curtin, and it's a small little village. Has its own church. It's very historic actually. There's a Wyberton, it's named after a chap called Wybert, and he had a castle between Wyberton and the river. The site of his castle is there, so it's a very historical place, and the church is quite old. And in fact, way back in 1953 or 52, when my parents, could have been 51, my parents first came to live in Boston and I came to spend a holiday with them, my father rented part of Wyberton Vicarage to live in before he bought a house. It could be 1951. So I came for a holiday, and I spent Easter or part of the summer or something living in Wyberton Vicarage before I had to go back to Harrogate and school. So looking at Wyberton, it had some history for us too. Anyway, these folks came up and wanted us to help to provide the wedding transport for a wedding at Wyberton Church. I can't remember the exact time of the year. It wasn't winter or anything. Could have been late spring or something like that. 1986, and they wanted the broom carriage. Now the broom is a square carriage. It's enclosed. It was the type of carriage was designed by a chap called Lord Broom, and it was a pretty superior kind of vehicle. Ours was original inside. It had green leather upholstery. It had a curved glass front to it, so it wasn't just an ordinary growler. It was a really smart broom, and it was painted red and black. It was in good nick. And Juno, no, it wasn't Juno, probably it was Hebe at this time. We'd got another, Juno was getting a bit old, the old Dales pony, and so we got another one. I think it was probably Hebe, yes it was. That's why we had just these 1 or 2 extra problems. Hebe was quite young, and she'd done several weddings, and we got her used to working. She was a Dales pony. So we'd done the initial research into doing the wedding, and we've given the folks a quote, and they were happy with the price, and they were having a reception at Wyberton Village Hall, which was near the Pincushion. So the Pincushion, which is on the main road from Boston to Curtin, there's a big council estate there, huge. Then that was part of Wyberton as well. So we'd left the vehicle and the trailer at the Pincushion, at the village hall behind it. So when we finished the wedding and took the bride and groom back to the reception, there was the vehicle waiting for us. Helen was my assistant, our daughter. So this is quite memorable. Everything was going fine. So we took the bride. I can't remember where we picked her up. We must have picked her up somewhere, obviously. But we delivered her to the church, and we couldn't get into the church gateway because the gateway was just a bit narrow. The carriage was quite smart with beautiful paintwork, so we didn't want to damage it. So we dropped her outside the church and we pulled up. Oh, Wyberton Church has a long stone wall around the graveyard and the premises itself. I think it's about 4 foot high, something like that, solid stone. And the church gateway has solid stone gate posts. I remember that quite clearly as well. So we were sat there waiting while the wedding went on, as you do, and talking away, and all of a sudden there's this awful racket, and coming towards us from a farm further down the lane, beyond the church. I think you go down to Frampton, towards the marsh anyway, certainly towards Wybert's Castle. Anyway, all of a sudden, coming out of the distance was this yellow forklift truck. It was almost as if it was driverless, and it was coming hurtling towards us. Well, we got a bit concerned about this because there was nowhere to go at the side. We were parked alongside the church gate, the church wall, quite close to the gate. Church was over on this side, on our right hand side, and we were facing the sea, if you like, facing east. And this thing was coming towards us, and no matter what I tried to signal to this driver, I can't remember even seeing a driver, this thing was hurtling towards us, and the horse was getting a bit agitated, as they do. Yes, horses can get agitated. I've just been watching, just as a little sideways swipe about horses. There's been a film, this is 2024 now, there's been a film on the national network in England showing a lady attempting to stand next to a horse and the soldier, mounted soldier, outside Horse Guards on Whitehall. And next to the lady is a sign saying, "Don't get too near these things because they can bite and kick." And lo and behold, she just edges without any thought about the horse. Anyway, she gets too close and the horse grabs her arm and gives it a damn good shake. and then she collapses on the floor. Horses, you know, have feelings and everything, and they're just like us. They can get agitated. So this forklift truck was coming towards us at a rapid rate of knots, and all we could do was hang on to the horse. Anyway, the chap wasn't going to slow down or give us any thought at all. Ah dear, like some folks are, you know, they don't think of any thought about anybody else at all. Anyway, as it hurtled past, Hebe decided she would dive into the only hole that she knew she could go to, which was the church gateway, and the gates were open. So she dived, you know, split second, instantly to the right, turn to the right, no matter what. We got reins in our hands and everything and couldn't do anything about it. So the horse dived to the right, get out of the way of this yellow peril, this thing that was hurtling and making a dreadful noise right against her face, and she took the carriage with her. Well, as I told you earlier, the church gateway wasn't wide enough to take the horse and carriage. That's why we'd stayed outside. Well, after this particular split second movement of the horse, it was, and we were in the church gateway, well in, but there wasn't a gateway anymore, well, not as such anyway. We got off the carriage and Helen went to talk to the horse, and I went to have a look and see what had happened. And there, just to our right, beside the carriage, was what remains of the church gatepost, laying on its side. Oh, I don't know what it would be. This table in front of me is about 2 foot square. It was a bit more, maybe 2.5 foot, 3 foot square, stone gatepost, big. It was made up of big lumps of stone, you know, it wasn't one great chunk. And of course the gate was laying flat as well. But the carriage, would you believe it, she'd actually screwed the thing at 90 degrees instantly, and the right hand side of the carriage had pivoted on this stone gatepost. It had used it as a pivot, and it screwed the carriage round, so she dragged it round 90 degrees. And so halfway down the carriage was these awful indentations and scratches and scrawls and missing paintwork and whatever, where the carriage had pivoted, just turned on the gatepost. Well, the horse was fairly steady by this time. The noise had gone and we'd calmed her down, but that wasn't the worst of it, because on the carriage wheels, you know, originally carriage wheels are, they're wood, and they've got an iron tyre around them. Well, in modern times you don't have carriages with iron tyres anymore, because they rumble and grumble on the road, and they shake and bang and crash, and they make an awful noise and vibration and everything. So modern carriages, or carriages let's say modern, because this wasn't modern, this was a carriage from the late 1800s, it was original. It had rubber tyres, and you actually get a metal clincher that goes around the wheel and fasten it on the wheel, and then in that it's a big groove, and you actually thread a rubber tyre, solid rubber, into this. And well, they weren't there anymore. They'd been, because the carriage had been pivoted round 90 degrees, they'd been ripped off, and they were lying on the floor. So the carriage was sat on these clinchers, these, yeah, on top of the wheels. There was no rubber left anymore, it was lying on the floor. So that was the first thing we had to try and do, was to try and get these tyres back on the wheels. Good. I had no tools in me at all. You don't expect to have that kind of thing happen, you know. So I wandered off down the road, and I found a lady mowing a lawn. There's, opposite the church gate, there's some lovely houses behind a dyke. That's the other reason we couldn't move anywhere, because there's a dyke to our left and the stone wall on our right. And I explained the situation to the lady, and I said, you know, is there any chance you might have a mallet or a big screwdriver or something I can knock this rubber tyres back onto wheels, because the bride will be coming out soon and I've got to try and transport her back to her reception. Anyway, she said, well, my son's got some stuff in the garage in this wooden chest. So we went in and had a look, and there was a big flat-bladed screwdriver and a hammer. It might have been a mallet or a hammer. So I took those back and I started trying to punch this rubber section. There's a bit like that, and it goes out like that, and it comes in at the top, and as it comes down the bottom, it's a bit at the bottom that sticks out, and it's what goes in the groove. So I had to get these flappy bits at the side into this groove in this clincher around the wheel, so that it would run. Well, this took ages. Anyway, fortunately, the wedding ceremony went on for a bit, and I did manage to get the 4 tyres knocked onto the wheels in some sort of fashion. They were a bit haphazard, but the wheels would turn, and it wasn't too lumpy a ride, and we got the horse and the carriage out onto the road again before the folks came out of church. And because you see, then on the left hand side of the carriage looked beautiful. The left hand side was perfect. There wasn't a mark on it. By the way, you couldn't open the right hand door. It was jammed in, got jammed out of place, and what a mess. It's all hand built, you know, made of wood, and beautiful really. So first thing, when the folks came out of the church and they didn't know anything had happened, except that for some reason or other the church gatepost was lying on the floor, this stone gatepost. And when they'd gone into church, everything was hunky-dory, you know. So I had to explain to the vicar we'd had this accident. Fortunately, he had a sense of humour, and he could see the funny side of it, if you can say, was there a funny side of it? I suppose there was a funny side to the story. It wasn't funny for me at that time, I can tell you. So I gave him our details and said that no doubt our insurers would be contacting him. We were insured. So there we are, the photographs went on, and we got the lady and her new husband into the carriage. We did explain then that there was a problem, or we'd had a problem. That's why the church gatepost was lying on the floor, and that the other side of the carriage was a mess. In fact, it was a wreck. And the wheels they were turning, but they weren't quite as comfortable as they were when we arrived. Anyway, we got back to reception, and we deposited the girl, a young lady, and her husband, and we loaded up the carriage and the horse and went off back home to Great Steeping near Spilsby, whence we then had to sort out our side of the problem, because the carriage was unusable. So we had to contact our insurers and say this had happened, and no doubt the church authorities would be asking for some recompense to rebuild their church gatepost, and we needed to have the carriage repaired. So we took the carriage to Michael Collishaw at Newark, who had done quite a bit of work for us. He's a wheelwright, lovely chap, and he had done some work on the Victoria carriage. In fact, he'd built a hood for that Victoria carriage, so that it could be, the hood could be put up, you know, to keep the weather off the bride and groom and everything. And we took it to him and said, look, can you fix this? So we had a look at it, and first of all, obviously the wheels were a mess and they needed new clinchers and new tyres. And then the turntable underneath where the driver and the groom sat was the turntable, you know, it allowed the front wheels to turn. That was all bent and buckled. It was wrought iron, and he had to rebuild that, take it all to pieces and rebuild it. Then he had to take the right hand side door off and reshape it and refit it. Then the whole thing had to be repainted. It cost £2,500, which in 1986 was a lot of money. I think the church gatepost cost about the same. And we didn't find out, because insurers don't tell you, do they? How much they pay the unfortunate folks that you damaged. But that's the impression I got. So the whole thing was around about £5,000, the damage and the cost to repair. So I suppose there was an amusing side to the story, and so doing weddings for couples that are hopefully having a very pleasant, happy day and a memorable event and things like that, then other memorable things can happen, behind the scenes. I can't think there's anything else to tell you about this story, really. I think we've covered it. Again, I've not got the script. I'm just telling you my memories. The actual story that's written is a little bit more it's not so airy-fairy. There's not so many ands and whatevers as I put in this bit, but there we are. That's how we destroyed the church gateposts at Wyberton Church near Boston in about 1986. Hope you enjoyed the story. It's been a popular one on Buzzsprout. If you like the story, then you can actually read it in book form on our you can download the whole book. It's Northcote Book 1, 1984 to 1998, I think it is. You can download it free of charge, and this story is in there towards the beginning. Lots of other stories. Or you can listen to the story on Buzzsprout. Again, you can find all these things on our website. Links up here. And then if you like what we're doing, maybe you give us a like on YouTube, and perhaps even think about subscribing to this channel. That would help the channel to grow. It would be very good for us, and if you like it, we'd appreciate that. And so we'll leave you with that, and thanks for being with us. Until the next time, cheerio.